from the All Indiana Podcast Network.
It's time for real conversation about the real issues that affect our communities.
Poverty, education, equality, and more.
This is Real Talk.
Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison.
Welcome to Real Talk on the All Indiana Podcast. I'm Reverend Charles Harrison, and on this episode, I will be talking to Rick Snyder, President of the FOP of 86 out of Indianapolis, about the recent police action shootings, one in Elwood and the other in Richmond, Indiana. So we're going to be talking to Rick Snyder about what's going on nationally with the surge of police action shootings and other issues relating to crime and violence. Welcome to Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison, and thank you so much for joining me today. And shortly, I will have Rick Snyder from the FOP 86 in with me in the studio as we talk about the issue of the increase in what seems to be police action shootings in Indiana and certainly across the nation, and an update on where we are in Indianapolis when it comes to homicides, shootings, and stabbings. But prior to getting to that conversation, this week I had a chance to talk on Community Connect with Tina Cosby as we talked about the recent murder of a prominent business leader in the city, funeral director and minister, Reverend James Dixon III. And he was killed as he was leaving his business by an 18-year-old and a 19-year-old. And it really raises the whole issue again of black-on-black violence. And when I talked on the Tina Cosby show, Community Connect, we really dealt with that issue of what seems to be an ignoring in the black community about this whole issue of black-on-black violence. It is a major issue, not just in Indianapolis, but all across the country, but certainly in Indianapolis. Almost every year, 7 to 8 out of 10 homicide victims and suspects are black. And we see this disproportionate number of blacks, African Americans being killed every year through violence. Sadly, much of it is through gun violence. It seems to be a taboo in our community, and many in the community don't want to talk about the issue. Many try to deflect from the issue and say that there is, white-on-white violence and Asian-on-Asian violence and Hispanic-on-Hispanic violence, but that is all true. But disproportionately, the number of blacks that are killing each other nationally far exceeds what any other race is doing, not just in America, but anywhere in the world. This is a major epidemic, crisis in Black America. It has been going on now for about 50 years in this country. It does not seem to be getting any better. But when you talk about this issue, there are those in the black community who want to label you and call you names because they don't want to deal with this issue. And I know for myself, over the last 10 years in Indianapolis, as my work with the Indianapolis 10-Point Coalition, and certainly many things that I've said publicly in trying to address this issue, typically you get called names or you get attacked on social media, called coons and Uncle Toms and a sellout, or you get so-called labeled as a Republican, that if that's something bad, if you are a Republican, it doesn't matter what political party you are part of. And by the way, I'm not a Republican, I'm a moderate Democrat, but yet I see this issue, black-on-black violence, as a major critical issue that must be addressed. We cannot sit comfortably as Black Americans and allow homicides to be the leading cause of death for black males in this country, ages 1 year old to 44 years old. You almost have to get to 44 years old as a black male in this country so that homicide won't be the leading cause of your death. This is just absurd. We ought to be ashamed of this in black America, that we have not done more to address this epidemic and try to not just deal with the root causes of this issue, but come up with solutions to dramatically decrease this. You know, as a pastor, there are too many parents that people like me are having to console as they are grieving over the loss of their son or daughter. There are too many children that stand in front of caskets crying because their father in particular has been killed, and tragically at a young age, in this country. And we cannot continue to tolerate this level of violence in black America and really be, comfortable with that or ignore that. Is probably a better term to use. Ignore what is happening in front of us. There are not too many black families in America that have not been impacted by this violence, and this violence is going to continue. We have to move this to the top of the priority list when it comes to issues that we have to address as black America and come up with our own solutions in dealing with this problem that continues to get worse every year and claim too many lives. Black America, we are about 12 to 13% of the population, but every year we are 50% or more of the homicide victims in this country. So that is the kind of crisis that we are facing. When it comes to the news, nightly news, almost in every major city in the country, it almost leads off with a shooting that has occurred, and either the person has been injured or killed, or multiple people have been shot or killed, or shot or injured in a sometimes a short period of time. Within an hour or two, you can have a number of people who have been shot or shot and killed in cities all across America. And we have to deal with this issue. We cannot continue to ignore this issue, and it has to be pushed up to the forefront, I believe, of issues that we have to deal with as Black America. Over the next few weeks, I'm going to have leaders from across the country as we continue to talk about this issue, black-on-black violence. I know that many don't like that, terminology, black-on-black violence, but I'm going to use it despite the critics, because it is a major issue. It is happening in cities all across the country. My family has been impacted by it on a number of occasions. My brother's been killed. My nephew's been killed. I've had cousins that have been killed. I am the pastor of a major church in a major city in the country. I've had members that have had family members and loved ones killed by this violence. The work I do with 10 Point over the last 23 years, I have been to hundreds of homicide scenes in this city of Indianapolis, and shooting scenes over the 23 years I've been doing 10 Point. So I see almost on a daily basis the impact. Yesterday I was at a prayer vigil for James Dixon III, and hundreds of people showed up for that prayer vigil. And those who are committing this kind of senseless violence don't really understand the impact that it has on the broader community when they take the life of someone that they should not have killed. So this is an issue that I'm going to be dealing with over the next few weeks, and bringing in guests from not just in Indianapolis, from across the country. This is Reverend Harrison with Real Talk. I will be right back with my special guest, Rick Snyder from the FOP 86, as we talk about the increase in police action shootings across the country. We have had two within the last few weeks in Indiana, and also where we are right now in Indianapolis with crime and violence. Welcome back to Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison, and I am so excited to have a good friend of mine, and he comes in almost once a month, but probably once every 6 or 7 weeks, and we try to catch up on what's going on in Indianapolis, but sometimes we also talk about what's going on nationally, and that is Rick Snyder, president of the FOP Lodge 86 here in Indianapolis. And welcome, Rick. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Is this on?
Yes, it is on. Yes,
okay,
go
great,
ahead. Yes,
great.
yes. I'm sorry I had it turned down, but it's good to see you. Let's get right into it because I know there's several things that are going on. And one of the things yesterday, we had another police officer shot, this time in Richmond. The latest that I heard this morning is that the officer is fighting for her life, and we just buried an officer who was shot and killed in Elwood. My question is, are we seeing an increase in police officers being shot, not just in Indiana but nationally? And if so, what's going on, and what do you think may be driving this?
Yeah, we absolutely are, and we're seeing it here in Indiana, and we are seeing it across the country. Now, I'm a man of stats. I always got my stats, right? Well, listen, but here are the facts. What we have seen so far this year, this is January through July of 2022, we are averaging a police officer in this nation being shot in the line of duty every single day.
Wow. Every day?
Every day.
Wow.
Every day, at least one officer is being shot in this country. Now, in addition to that, we're also averaging an officer being shot and killed one every week. On top of that, we're having an officer dying in the line of duty, being shot, stabbed, ran over by a vehicle, heart attack, whatever the case may be, once every 52 hours.
Wow.
An officer is dying in service to their community. Now, the one thing that we see in these trends that's doubly alarming is officers are not just being shot, but we had 71 officers shot in 46 separate ambush attacks. And what we're seeing is this dramatic spike in attacks that are coming from a point of ambush on our officers. What's that mean? It means that folks are targeting officers. They're not just violently responding to the actions of officers. They're actually proactively targeting the officers. And this is what I tell folks. And we have this conversation all the time.
Right.
Folks in the neighborhoods,
right.
The real folks in our community, the folks that are working hard, that are trying to provide for their family, that are trying to keep their family safe, the folks that may be out on the margins, the most marginalized in our community,
right.
They know what's up.
That's
what
true.
they know is that there has been a war declared on cops in this country. We've seen it develop over the last 2 years. And I tell people this. The reason why violent offenders are ambushing, assassinating, killing your officers, it isn't just about the officers. They're killing the officers and attacking the officers because it's the uniformed law enforcement officer that stands between you and the death and destruction they want to wreak over this country. And that's why we're seeing the officers on the front lines falling in these great numbers. We've seen a 15% increase in the number of officers shot in 2022 over this time in 2021.
Okay.
That's a 15% increase, but that's on top of a record level amount that occurred in 2021. It's a lot like the homicides we're seeing here in Indianapolis.
Right.
So I think the point with this is that the trends that we are seeing, I just told a group of retired officers, they've pretty well seen it all.
Okay.
Right? I think about the folks like a Darrell Pierce in the city of Indianapolis.
Right.
That have been around and kind of seen it all. They've seen it in good times and bad times, ebb and flow. They will tell you to a person, they have never seen it like this.
Wow.
And what I shared with these retirees is that there's a few of us, because of what we do and we're in this every day, we've had the opportunity to peek over the horizon and see what is coming. And what I can tell you and your listeners is you have never seen what's coming our way.
Well, let me ask the question, because when I first started seeing a difference, and maybe for me it goes back to Michael Brown and Ferguson, which kind of led the whole Black Lives Matter movement, you know, and then certainly we've had a lot of other high-profile individuals who were killed, or at least they were killed by a police officer that has been used almost to attack law enforcement in this country, which led, you know, with the, incident with George Floyd, the defund the police movement.
Correct.
Are those the kind of events nationally that has contributed to what you feel is this greater attack on law enforcement in this country, or your assessment of that?
I don't really think that they're necessarily the root cause.
Okay.
I think they're a piece of the puzzle.
All right.
I think that these events, tragedies that have occurred, have been utilized by other people who really don't care about the people involved. They just simply use their deaths to drive a political agenda. The George Floyd incident, we've been very consistent on this. Absolute tragedy. Should have never occurred.
Right.
That officer was criminally charged and convicted, as he should have been.
Right.
And justice is being done, but you still have a life that was lost, correct?
Right.
Michael Brown, the problem with that is that was born out of a fallacy.
Right.
Now, there's no disputing that. That's not Rick's opinion.
Right.
That was the findings rendered by the United States Department of Justice, including then Attorney General Eric Holder, who said that this narrative of hands up, don't shoot, that Michael Brown had his hands up when he was shot, are all proven false.
Right.
What we have said is, listen, let's set aside the arguing over these matters, and if we're going to talk about what matters, let's start with facts matter, not your truth, not my truth, but the truth, and then work from there. And in doing that, we're going to find rooms for improvement. But what's been done is this has all been hijacked and driven to use as a wedge issue to force other political agendas. We saw it in the last 2 years.
Right.
We had corporations that were engaging in what they were calling social justice issues when they had no earthly idea what the heck they were even talking about.
Right.
And in doing that, they were funding activist groups that were then spinning up these political divides, and also at the same time, by the way, demonizing, demoralizing, and dehumanizing the person behind that badge and that uniform. The problem that occurs with that is the same problem that occurs if the police dehumanize the people they're interacting with.
Right.
When we no longer see the humanity in one another, you lose all moral compass. You lose all sense of what's right and wrong. And what you end up with is a society that's built upon who has the biggest stick, who can commit the most violence to control or overcome that of another person. No one wants to live in that society.
Right.
We have people fleeing those kinds of societies trying to come to our country, while at the same time we're turning our country upside down, going in the very direction of what they're runing from.
Yeah, that is so true. This is Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison, and my guest today is Rick Snyder, president of the FOP Lodge 86 here in Indianapolis. Rick, what impact has that really had on the retention of police officers, the recruiting of police officers here locally in Indianapolis and nationally? There seems to be concern that police departments across the country are not able to recruit at the level of officers that they're losing.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So can you talk about that?
Nationwide issue. We're seeing it in every major city. Coincidentally, in every major city where we're seeing the police being dehumanized and demonized, right? Listen, this job, I always talk about this. I just talked to Fox 59 about this. This job, policing, and you have a perspective on this as a police chaplain and just a member in the community. You see it on the front lines. Policing is a profession of possibilities, not probabilities. We have to operate in a realm where we know all things, all dangers are possible, because if you don't, you're going to die.
Right.
So what we have to do is say, if we know what all the possibilities are, then we take tactics, training, education, and steps to drive down the probabilities of the bad things happening. If you go into it saying, no, it's whether it's probable or not, then you would say, well, listen, research shows, stats again, on Tuesdays, very rarely do officers get shot on Tuesdays. So on Tuesdays, don't wear your body armor. Don't carry your gun. Don't take any kind of defensive protective actions, because the odds are on Tuesdays they're pretty low. Well, we can't operate that way, right?
Yeah.
And I always say it's easy for the citizens to understand. You take the same approach with we're in a building. I'll guarantee you every fire smoke detector in this building is operational today.
Right.
Not based on whether or not the odds are there's a fire today, but the possibility that it will occur.
Right.
When you leave your home and set your burglar alarm, your home alarm, you're not just picking and choosing what days to do that on based on the probabilities of it happening. The possibilities is what you're focused on. Same principle. Here's the point. If officers, I always say this, officers will die for something, but they won't die for nothing.
Okay.
If you strip the premise, the whole basis for why an officer risks their individual life to protect their community, and give the appearance, just the appearance, that community doesn't support them and doesn't want them doing what they're doing, they're not going to do it. When you take a new person that's considering it as a job, and they know that an officer's dying every 52 hours in this nation, they got to have a real sense of purpose of why they want to step into that arena. If you strip that out of them, who wants to do the job? Nobody's doing it for the money.
Right.
They're doing it for a higher calling. But people aren't going to walk into a known ambush, if you will, just to simply die for no reason at all. And nationwide, we can't get folks to apply for this job. Here in Indianapolis, we are currently 250 officers short. We're funded for 1,850 officers. And again, you know me, I give credit where credit is due. Credit to Mayor Joe Hogsett. He has funded that, and he's fought for that.
Right.
But we only have 1,600 officers. The IMPD right now is making plans, tabletop plans, for what we will do when we hit 1,500 officers. So they are projecting we will at least be 350 officers short in the next year if things don't change.
Wow.
Now, here's what the community sometimes doesn't understand. And I'll give you the behind-the-scenes perspective.
Right.
When a department tells you publicly we're making plans for how to provide service 350 officers short, that means they're making plans for what services to cut. What will they not do in order to be able to do what is critically needed? That means other things start getting cut, like community programs, the GREAT program, the POW Club. We no longer can staff those, so you pull people from those to staff taking runs on the street and critical life safety issues in the neighborhoods. Well, if you talk to folks in the community, they don't want that to happen. But here's the point. You got to have people to provide all of those pieces of the puzzle. So the question becomes, how do we get people to apply? How do we get high-quality folks to be employed in these jobs? The one thing you don't want to do is cut your requirements for the job.
Well, I think one of the challenges, if policing has been demonized, because, I have two kids that were contemplating going into policing. I think after the riots a few years ago and the demonization of policing, two children who were in their early teens, now I'm really having second thoughts about that and looking at something else, because policing has been demonized, in particularly in, I would say, in the African American community, but larger now, I think, in all segments of society. So how do you recruit in that kind of environment and atmosphere?
Well, if you think about it, that's exactly correct. We have children of police officers who want nothing to do with the job. Now, typically, you'll see kids want to be like their parents and be police officers. We have police officers that are telling their kids, don't do this. Not because, listen, the profession is a noble profession.
Correct.
But when you allow political activists and other agendas to strip the nobility out of it, the call on your life out of it, and make it a joke, nobody will do that. And it's the same for the military. And so these are jobs where you've got to instill that and show that support and the need for those folks to be in those positions, especially when you're wanting a police department that represents the community we serve. And if I see it all the time, you have children of color specifically who in their families, they hear nothing but negative things about the police. Now, we can argue right, wrong, hey, it's legitimate, it's whatever. But the fact still remains, if that is occurring, nobody's going to want to do that. Right? So what we're trying to do is, how do we proactively recruit? How do we engage at a younger level, show them the nobility of the profession, show them the opportunities that are there, and then at the same time instill that we need you. We need all folks, but we desperately need folks of color. We desperately need women in this profession. Women are the most underrepresented group in the profession. And we need more females and that female perspective to the job, to be quite honest with you. And it's very difficult to get folks to do that. At the same time, when you look at these stats, the attacks, hard to get people to understand why they would ever do that. Now, here's what this all goes back to, and it'll be nobody will be surprised by it. What's destabilizing all of this is this broken system, this revolving door.
Right.
We have prosecutors who, quite frankly, have hijacked the criminal justice system. You have individual prosecutors who have said, I will determine what laws will be enforced, not the state. So in Marion County, we have a prosecutor. I'm just going to be blunt about this, like many other major cities in the nation, who have said the law will be applied, prescribed by the way Ryan Mears thinks it should be prescribed, not what the state of Indiana says. You have a prosecutor who has spent more time telling you what laws he won't enforce versus what laws he will enforce. That's a problem, my friend.
But is that lawful? I guess most citizens would say, is it lawful for a local prosecutor to be able to determine what laws that are on the books, which ones he's going to prosecute and not prosecute?
I have asked that question for 2 years now.
Okay.
And I think you've seen it, and I've publicly asked it. Can an individual, an office holder, or an appointed person, say a chief of police or someone else such as that, or perhaps a prosecutor that's been appointed and not elected yet, can they disregard the laws of the state of Indiana by a matter of practice and or policy? We're not talking about discretion where you say, hey, on this case, I'm not going to apply the law on this because it really doesn't fit it, but I will over here. You're talking about a person that says, across the board, I am not going to apply the law by a matter of practice or policy, period. Can you do that? Well, last year in the general session, we saw a law that was proposed that was called non-compliant prosecutors that said if you have a prosecutor who does not enforce a law across the board, then the state attorney general can pick those cases up and file them. It would authorize them to do that.
Okay.
That bill did not even get a hearing.
It didn't.
No. And because you have this misdirection that somehow it's going to take discretion away from prosecutors, you're not even talking about that.
Okay.
I give you an example. Do you want a police officer, an individual police officer that goes out here on the streets today and says, across the board, because I don't agree with the law that's been enacted by the state of Indiana, the representatives of the people, I'm not going to enforce it.
Right.
Or I'm going to use no discretion, and I'm making the conscious decision I'm going to overly enforce every instance of a certain law. We don't want that.
Right. Certainly, yes.
So if you apply the same model that we're allowing prosecutors to do, who are supposed to be the chief law enforcement officer in the county, we've got big problems because here again, you go back to the law according to an individual rather than the law according to the people. And there is a big problem when you blur those lines.
You see, I guess this is Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison, and my special guest today is Rick Snyder, president of Lodge 86. Rick, I guess my question was, I thought that what is the role of the Attorney General of Indiana? I thought, that's the highest law enforcement officer in the state. That I didn't know they didn't have the power to go into a city and prosecute a case that is not being prosecuted by the prosecutor.
Yeah, not in Indiana. So we have to grant them that authority because rightfully so, we're trying to keep those decisions as close as possible to the local level.
Okay.
And rightfully so. I don't dispute that.
Right.
But there has to be a check and balance that says if somebody oversteps the bounds of their authority by saying, I'm the king of this county and I'm going to decide what laws. I mean, just think about that for a second. What do you do if a prosecutor says, hey, you know what? I really don't agree with domestic battery crimes, and therefore in our county, we're not going to charge anybody with domestic battery. As a matter of practice and policy, we're not going to do it. Now, people say, well, that's extreme, Rick. Well, where do you draw the line? See, you got the foot in the door when you had somebody saying, hey, because I'm going to try to get votes, I'm going to say I'm not going to file criminal charges on marijuana cases. And everybody says, hey, that's really cool. What we said is set the issue aside. The principle at hand is very, very important, because today it could be on that. But what if tomorrow it's a race-based crime? What if we say I'm not going to file crimes on certain people, or when certain people are victims of crimes, I'm not going to file the charge? We got big problems,
Right, yes.
And you've opened the door. So the point that we have said is don't even open that door. Have very clear delineations and parameters for officials to operate within. And if they choose not to, have a backup for that. I'll give you an example. You've got a prosecutor that's a leading gun control advocate. He wants to take guns away from people. Set the issue aside. It's just the facts.
Right.
However, in the same breath, we know in 2021, April of 2021, this prosecutor intentionally did not apply an existing law, that being the Jake Laird red flag law,
Right.
named after Officer Jake Laird, who
Right,
you knew, that was
right,
killed in the
right.
line of duty. He didn't apply it on that suspect in the FedEx massacre. That's not me saying
Right,
that. That's
right.
him
Well,
saying
that's
that.
true.
He
Yeah,
chose
yeah.
not to apply
Right,
it on him.
right.
That offender was able to go and purchase more guns because he was not put on the red flag list, not because the court said he wasn't guilty of it, but because the court never even saw it, never even knew about it, because the
Right.
prosecutor didn't take it to him.
Wow.
He goes on to shoot 13 people, kill 8 of those 13.
Right. Right.
Right? There's the real world implications and outcomes. That's why this is so important.
A question: is there a minimum number of officers that need to be on the streets of Indianapolis before it can become unsafe for
Yeah.
the broader city? And if that number is not met, whose responsibility is it to bring that to the attention of the larger public?
Well, there's never been like a nationalized standard.
Okay.
There's never been like a formula that you use.
Okay.
But there are a lot of things that you can do. I mean, we all do it every day with
Right.
what we do. We
Right.
take bits and pieces of information, and we know what is needed. But it's also subject matter experts, going back to people even like a past chief, Rick Height.
Right.
Rick Height would always tell people when we had 1,500 officers, he was telling people we had 1,500 officers doing the work of 3,000. And he was right.
Right.
Now, people would say, so does that mean we need 3,000 officers? Even Rick Height, in conjunction with the FOP, in conjunction with rank and file officers and outside experts,
Right.
we have consistently said 1,750 is your bare bones minimum.
Wow.
Mayor Hogsett has now brought the funding up to 1,850.
Okay.
We only have 1,600.
Okay.
Most folks would tell you the reasonable number would probably be 2,200.
2,200
is where you really should be.
Okay.
1,750 is like when you're on life support and you
Okay.
can't do extra things. And we're trying to be all things to all people with 1,600, and now we're going to 1,500.
So that is based on population of the city.
Plays a role.
Plays a role. in
Levels
that?
of crime.
Levels of crime. Okay.
Geographic area and what you're seeing, right? So you
Okay.
may not have, you may have 6 officers working an area that has a high frequency of crimes being reported,
Right.
and a lower number of officers in an area with lower frequency of
Right,
crimes
right,
being reported,
right.
right? But what you would say is that at a minimum, there is some kind of minimum number across the board, no matter what, right? Fire service, we don't staff our fire departments that way.
Right. Right.
We don't
That's
say,
true.
hey, we have less fires in Franklin Township, therefore I'm going to put less firemen in the firehouse. We put a minimum number in every single firehouse, and then we come back and add where it's more needed. We're not doing that in the police service right now. And that's a disservice to the community we serve.
I know one of the things that you have proposed, or at least had a conversation with me about, is the hours that the officers work. And one of the things you talked about, maybe instead of an 8-hour shift, a 12-hour shift. Well, what would be the impact of that?
Yeah, so what we have proposed is, and there's a lot of value behind it, is moving. Currently, our officers work an 8.5-hour shift.
Okay.
That half hour is where our roll calls overlap.
Okay.
So that you still have officers in the neighborhood while the new shift is roll calling and getting prepared for the day.
Okay.
What we have proposed is move that to a 10-hour shift.
Okay.
Let me explain to you what that means. It means that you would have 3 different shifts, day, middle, and late shifts, working 10 hours each.
Okay.
That means you're putting 30 hours of work in a 24-hour period.
Okay.
What you then do is you overlap your shifts at peak demand times.
Okay.
So we know on average we have a high volume of runs in the early to mid-afternoon time frame. Traffic crashes, rush hour traffic,
Right.
people getting home, domestics ramping up, all these other things. Well, what happens if you went from having your current staffing number to nearly doubling that during those peak demand times?
Okay.
You're getting a lot more service and functionality to the community, really with the same amount of officers that you've had. So what we have said is we want to get more officers. We want to get to 1,850. But in the interim, is there a more efficient and effective way to use the officers that we have? And this would do it. The reason why we say 10 hours and not 12 hours, even the National Transportation Board will not allow people driving semis, motor carriers, to drive over 10 hours in a day.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
You start getting sleepy, tired,
Right.
dangerous, you're less safe, right? Why on earth would we do that with police officers?
Okay.
So we've said don't do the 12-hour model. Some agencies do, but they're smaller agencies and they can make it work.
Okay.
An agency our size, the sweet spot is that 10-hour shift.
Okay. Okay. One of the things I want to talk about, and former Deputy Mayor Ojan Williams wanted me to raise this question because he's at the fair and he's on the fair board, and we know we had an incident at the fair where a juvenile was detained with 3 guns, and you want to kind of tell us about what happened there. I think there's some concern about the outcome of that.
Yeah, well, public reports show that we had some kind of disturbance just outside the fairgrounds property.
Right.
And an off-duty officer who was working off-duty employment at the fairgrounds observed this disturbance. Thank God they were there.
Right.
It was a Lawrence police officer, by the way.
Okay.
So thank God we had an officer that was working off duty at the fairgrounds outside of Lawrence that was able to be an extra set of eyes and ears and see this happening. Officer intervenes in the disturbance. Long story short, you have juveniles that were detained. One of the juveniles had a backpack in which public reports show that 3 handguns were found in that backpack.
Wow.
3 handguns, magazines, and ammunition for them. The question becomes, what the heck was he planning to do with those going onto the fairgrounds? And number 2, thank God that he was stopped. Now, you have a juvenile in possession of those guns. I've heard people say, well, hey, here's what happens when you have this new constitutional carry thing.
Right.
Has nothing to do with this. This was a prohibited possessor of firearms, regardless of any changes in law or existing law. A juvenile cannot possess a handgun. He had 3 of them. It is a crime.
So even with the new law, because I think that's where the confusion is.
Sure.
People think that because of the new law, that anybody can carry a gun now. Okay. I think that's where the confusion is with a lot of people.
All that change in the law did, and again, I always say this, take the politics out of it because there's plenty of time for people to debate those.
Right.
In police work, we just deal with the facts.
Okay.
You created here again, Rev, what if I say, hey, I'm not going to enforce that law?
Right.
Or I don't like that law.
That's true.
Or, hey, if you didn't change that law, I'm just going to enforce it as constitutional carry, and I'll just decide that nobody has to have a permit or a license.
Right.
Not good.
Right.
But for police, we say, you establish the law, representatives of the people, we have to enforce it. All it did was say that people who previously had to have a permit to carry the handgun no longer has to have the permit.
Okay.
It didn't change who can and cannot carry the guns.
Okay.
If you were prohibited from having the gun before with the permit, you're prohibited from having it today without the permit. One class of group is juveniles. You can't have a handgun. It's against the law.
So what's the age for a juvenile where you cannot possess a gun? 18 and under?
18.
19? Okay.
Yeah. So with that, though, here's the point. And I've made this since 2019. The problem is, though, we have a criminal justice system that does not hold juveniles accountable when they're armed with guns.
That's true.
Don't take my word for it. Go look at the stats and the outcomes. What we know is we have juveniles that aren't even being arrested, not at the direction of the officer, but at the direction of the court system and the prosecutor saying, do not arrest that juvenile with the gun, put them back into the custody of their parent, write a report, and we'll look at it later. Well, what did we just tell that juvenile? Did we just really intervene and make sure? What if the parent isn't doing a good job in the parenting role?
Right.
And you put them back in their custody and they're not paying attention. The juvenile goes right back out on the street and gets another gun.
Right.
I'm not saying that's in every case. I'm just asking you, what if that is the case?
Well, I think
plays a role.
Yeah, it certainly does. And I think in a lot of cases that's what we're seeing. And our concern is, been doing this a long time, there is no accountability. So where there is no accountability,
that's right,
then what brings about a change?
That's right.
Yeah.
If I've got a juvenile that has no dad in the equation, and then on top of that, as a good friend of ours used to say, where we saw a big change was when we started seeing moms being taken out of the equation.
Right. That's true.
Addiction issues, prostitution issues, trafficking, maybe dead, overdosed, whatever the case may be. And then now I've got a juvenile that has a gun. How do I think they're going to have a stable environment if I just release them back, take the gun away from them and release them back? That's not fair to the child involved.
Right, that's true.
Let alone the criminals, the wolves that are among us. And you know this, Reverend, as a pastor and a faith leader, but just a man in this community.
Right.
There are wolves amongst us that seek to destroy in our community. Well, when they look at that and they see, hey, nothing happens to the kid if they've got the gun, I'm going to put the gun in their hands.
That's right.
And that's exactly what happens. When we say, where are these juveniles getting all these guns? Well, they're not running down to the local gun shop and buying them.
That's true.
Adult criminals are putting them in their hands because if they're caught carrying them, nothing's going to happen to them.
Right.
And oh, by the way, kid, if you talk and tell them where this gun came from, you won't be here anymore.
Right.
See, that's how that works. And so because we see it all the time, we're seeing the adult criminals putting the guns in the hands of the juveniles.
Right.
The police do their job. They make the arrest, but the juvenile court system and the prosecutor says, do not take them to jail. Put them back in the home, take the gun from them, and put them right back into that environment. Well, we are just chasing our tail. This incident at the fairgrounds, that juvenile didn't go to the juvenile detention center. See, most people, when they hear that, are going to be shocked. They're going to say, what do you mean he didn't go to the juvenile center? No, the court system said, do not bring him here. Release him to a parent or a guardian. Complete a police report, and we'll look at it later.
So then in that particular case, then the prosecutor would have to file charges, the prosecutor's office, and then it goes before the judge, the juvenile judge.
Correct. Okay. But you have a juvenile system that is saying, listen, we want to deinstitutionalize juvenile crimes. Sounds good.
Right.
But what we're doing is we're bypassing the avenue for intervention in the lives of our juveniles. I'd much rather arrest this juvenile with these 3 guns, get them into the system, and get intervention and resources placed into that, and keep them away from the guns, than to turn my back, slap them on the wrist, and say, hey, don't do that again, and then put them right back into the same environment where a gun's going to be put back in their hands, and now somebody dies and they lose their life because they're a victim, or they lose their life because they're a suspect and they're arrested and they go to prison for the rest of their lives.
One final question. If a juvenile is apprehended and has committed a shooting, at that point, are they still in juvenile, and would they have to go to jail, or what is that process?
Yeah, there's the more serious the crime is, and the more violent it is.
Okay.
And there are certain crimes like murder, for instance. It's an automatic waiver to adult court.
Okay.
But the vast majority of the times, they're going to stay in the juvenile court system.
Okay.
Hopefully for intervention and rehabilitating that situation so that they don't put them on a path of incarceration and a life of crime as an adult. But what I'm here to tell you, if the converse solution is no intervention at all, and basically embolden the criminal activity, you've now set that juvenile up for failure. That's why I talk to adult offenders at age 24, 25, 26, and you do too on the street. They would tell you, I wish somebody would have intervened when I was 12 and got popped with that first joint. I got popped with that gun or a knife at school or whatever. I really wish they'd held me accountable then. Now my life is in turmoil. How do I get out of the game, right? And they're stuck, either out on the streets or in prison. And we owe it to one another. And I'll prove it to you with this last point. We have an adult male that we just had to charge federally to seek federal intervention on him. His criminal history in Marion County, he had 24 felony convictions.
Wow.
Many of which involve a gun. We have everybody talking about the need for more gun laws and all these other things.
Right.
We have him arrested, charged, and convicted for gun crimes. 24 felony convictions. He's back out on the street with a gun again.
Wow.
We know as law enforcement officers that nothing is happening to him at the local level, and we have to seek federal intervention because we have a prosecutor in the court system that aren't holding violent offenders accountable. That's why when we have this officer out of Elwood who shot and killed, that's by an offender who previously shot at police in Indianapolis.
Right.
Got a lenient, modified sentence that let him out of jail early, back on the streets, and now this young officer has lost his life. We're now finding out that the suspect involved on the Richmond officer being shot, extensive criminal history, been deemed a habitual offender, and instead of being in jail was released back out onto our streets, and now we have an officer that's fighting for her life. That is happening in our neighborhoods every single day, every single night.
Yeah, that's true. That is so true.
Over 600 people shot or stabbed so far this year. We're averaging, we're on pace for at least 220 people to lose their lives this year in Indianapolis. Back-to-back record years. The point is, many of these tragedies are preventable, but we have a system that has been hijacked and is allowing this revolving door to spin faster. And so next week, your Indianapolis, every police agency in Marion County now, their officers are going to have a vote. And they're going to have a confidence vote. And they're going to tell the public if they have confidence in this prosecutor. And they're going to tell the public if they have confidence in the court system. I have never heard of a vote of confidence by police about a court system anywhere in the country. It's huge.
Yeah, I haven't heard that either. This is the first time, isn't it? Yeah.
So think about it. What happens if your police say, we don't have confidence in your court system?
Wow.
The question becomes, then why should you?
Wow.
That's brinking on the point of anarchy if you lose your courts. What we're telling you as law enforcement officers is it's bad enough we're going to vote on it.
Right.
Never been done.
Right.
God help us if the outcome is no confidence. I fear that.
Right.
But at the same time, the question has to become, what are we doing about this?
Right.
I've begged judges all the way up to the Chief Justice of the Indiana Supreme Court, face-to-face like we are now, to intervene and fix this. And nothing has changed. The only thing that's changed is more people have died. And your officers have said enough is enough. We would love for the community to stand with us, demand better of our officials, and start saving lives, especially the lives of our fellow black neighbors who are being disproportionately impacted by homicides and non-fatal shootings in our city. I know together we can make this better and we can save lives. That's why facts matter.
Rick, thank you so much for this conversation today. And I'm always enlightened as we talk. And we talk about these real critical issues that are happening every day in our communities across Indiana and across the country. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Reverend Charles Harrison, and this has been Real Talk. Join me next time as I bring you more real talk about the real issues that affect our communities here in Indianapolis and across the country. And next week, I will have with me Reverend Ronald Covington, who is the president of the Hallville Strong Neighborhood Association, and he is the pastor of the Friendship Baptist Church. As we talk about the issue of crime and violence, we talk about yesterday the prayer vigil that we had for one of our beloved business leaders who was shot and killed by two young people. Also be sure to follow and subscribe to this podcast and share on Facebook and Twitter. This is Reverend Charles Harrison. Thank you so much for joining me today on Real Talk, and I pray that you have a blessed and awesome day.
This is Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison.
Be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast.
And be sure to check out other great podcasts on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Online now at allindianapodcast.com.